Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Hayes from Sapbush Hollow Farm, and you are in my Sapbush Cafe kitchen. I don't usually let anybody back here, but I'll make an exception for you today. This afternoon, I'm going to show you the first stage for making what's going to be this weekend's special. We always start several days in advance to cook the meat properly and to build up the best flavor. And this weekend's special is going to be butternut pork stew with bacon and fennel. All we're going to do today is season the stew meat. The pork that we're working with is pork from our own pastured pigs, and I always get our pork stew meat from the shoulder. It has the most connective tissue for the best flavor, a good amount of fat, and that connective tissue helps the meat to stay juicy and silky as it breaks down when we braise it. So that's where I get the best meat for any kind of stewing. And the seasonings that we're going to be using are very simple. We're using a fine ground salt, black pepper, sage, cayenne, nutmeg, and ginger. If you're looking for the exact ratio for this, you can find the recipe in Long Way on a Little, my biggest cookbook out there. And all we're going to do is I'm going to mix it together and I'm going to season the meat. You might notice that a lot of times when people season meat, they go for a coarse salt. That's fine for roasting. But if you're going to make a spice rub for the meat, which is what we're doing, you want to use a fine salt because it incorporates with the spices better. And I will admit I do like to touch my food a lot, but I also find, particularly when working with meat, that seasoning is best done with my fingers and not using any utensils. But I'm just going to mix these spices with my fingers, and then I'm going to sprinkle it over the meat. And it might look like a lot of meat for a little bit of spice, but when you work with your hands, you can evenly distribute those spices all throughout. So it'll be a nice, gentle coating. And the idea when you're working with pastured pork, which has inherent good flavor, is to season to heighten and show off the real pork flavor, not to mask it or dominate it. So we did not go heavy on the seasonings. The recipe in the cookbook is scaled down for home cooking, and you would use only 2 to 3 pounds of pork stew meat. I'm working with about 15 pounds here today because butternut pork stew is one of my customers' favorite specials, so we need to make quite a lot of it. And that's it. It's all seasoned evenly. If you look through, you see it's light, which means that that really yummy porky flavor is coming through. And we're just going to put that away in the refrigerator for today, and tomorrow we'll do the next step. Good afternoon. This is Shannon Hayes again from Sapbush Hollow Farm on day 2 of making our butternut pork stew. And again, for those of you who are curious about the recipe, you can find it in Long Way and a Little. It's called Butternut Pork Stew. It's on page 203, and you can also find it by searching on my website, theradicalhomemaker.net. Also, it works to go to sapbush.com. This is also one of the most popular recipes in our cafe, and one of the reasons why it's so popular is it does take a while to make it. I've given you a number of shortcuts so that you can make it quickly at home in the cookbook recipe, but I'm showing you here the different flavor steps that we take in the cafe. And I know, before we have a big fire here, you're probably a little mystified as to why I'm grilling when I told you I was making stew. How is it that I would expect you to grill a stew? Well, we're not actually cooking the meat here right now for the stew. We're just flavoring it. What I've done is I have set up a small fire with hardwood in here, and you'll see that this meat is packed on barbecue skewers very tightly. If I were actually making kebabs, I would never pack my meat so tightly. All I'm doing right now is letting this meat get kissed by the smoke from the hardwood to add a little flavor step. I'm going to do the actual cooking inside. So all I'm doing is I'm heating up a fire until I can hold my hand about this height for no more than 2 or 3 seconds. And then I'm just searing this meat for 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes per side. And then that's it. We're not actually cooking it all the way through. The actual cooking is going to happen inside. Okay. We have everything ready to go to actually put the stew together to cook. We have our meat that was seared on the wood fire. We have onions and garlic and beautiful butternut squash and fennel. And all of this, by the way, came from Barber's just down the road, Barber's Farm in Fulton, not West Fulton. And we have some tomatoes that we're going to add. And the broth, the bone broth. I'll show you on another IGTV episode how to make bone broth, but for today, it's all done and ready for us to go. And the other essential ingredient that I have is the bacon. You'll notice there's no salt, there's no pepper, there's no extra spices other than those few spices that we seasoned the meat with yesterday. And right here, what I'm doing is I'm actually seasoning the pan and pre-seasoning the soup with bacon ends. That's bacon ends, not actual bacon, but bacon ends. If you come over here and look at this, whenever we make bacon on the farm, we slice the belly on a meat slicer, and you always end up with these end cuts at the finish of it. These are thick pieces, they're fattier, not as much meat in it, and they're really not perfect for that nice slice of morning bacon that we would sell at a prime price. And what we do is we sell them on the farm for half price, or we hold them and we use them for making stews like this, because this is actually preferable. If you look over here, these chunkier pieces, they stand up better to the braising. They sear nicely, they add a lot of flavor, and you don't need that perfect streaky bacon to do it. So there's no need to waste the money on that. Farmers, if you're watching this and you're sending your pigs out to your butcher and your butcher is only sending you perfectly sliced bacon back, your butcher's holding out on you. He or she is probably taking these end cuts home for themselves. So you might want to ask about that if you're not seeing that come back with your processed pork. Okay, that's just the second pot. So we have our bacon, it has seared and it's also released its fat, which is perfect, because now we're going to add our vegetables into that fat. We've got some garlic, and then our onions, if you wanted to, you could sear each of these vegetables individually to bring out even more flavor, but I think when that comes to that, with this particular soup, you hit a point of diminishing returns. And we've got this beautiful fennel that came from down at Barber's. Now, if you're using the recipe in Long Way and a Little on page 203, I'm going to tell you how to make this a lot easier at home, using a slow cooker as well, so you don't have to be having these giant pots and these big bowls of vegetables. It can be made pretty quickly in the slow cooker. But if you want to use some of the tips that I use here in the cafe to add extra flavor, like marinating the meat in the spice rub beforehand or searing it over your grill, you can still then take the meat and add it to your slow cooker, and you'll have a really delicious, delicious dish. And now we're adding in the pork. I'm spilling it all over here. And then our tomatoes. So, as you're probably observing, again, not a lot of seasonings, just a lot of basic, really good ingredients. You don't have to have a lot of fancy techniques. I always say that the most important ingredient when making a stew is time, just time. And yes, we take a couple days to prepare our soups here, but we're not doing fancy techniques. We're doing things that anybody can do at home. We're just investing the time to do it right. So this stew is now ready to start braising, and we're gonna leave it for a couple hours, and we'll come back later when it's all finished. And if you're getting really curious, don't forget to come see us on Saturday to taste it.